Welcome to Gut Punch, the podcast that explores life-changing moments. Hosted by Kathryn Lancioni, a seasoned educator with personal insights into resilience. Kathryn shares how life can change in an instant, shaping our path forward. Each episode features inspiring guests who face their own gut punch moments. Guests share their journeys through loss, upheaval, and triumph. What to expect: honest conversations, lessons in resilience, inspiration for growth. Join Kathryn as she highlights courage and perseverance in every story. Gut Punch is a reminder that there is always a path forward. Be part of the conversation. Register now to join Kathryn for today's journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gut Punch podcast. My name is Kathryn Lancioni, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today, we are joined by Gledis Vogli, who is a dear friend and the survivor of an incredible gut punch. So, Gledis, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure, Kathryn.
Oh, no, I'm delighted to have you on the show. So before we talk about your gut punch moment, I'd love it if you could share with everyone a little bit about your background and what you do.
Absolutely. So, hi, I am Gledis Vogli. I am founder of Kura Health, and we are on a mission to make mental health more manageable, more understanding, more measurable, and ultimately more scientific in order to improve outcomes. So my work is really dedicated in ensuring that no one has to go through the mental health journey alone, and with enough tools and support to, make it manageable.
That's great. Yeah. And, I should say to everybody, if you're listening to the show in this first and second season, you'll remember, I should say, that 𝗘𝗃𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗃, who's, head sort of the nonprofit of It's Okay to Dream Foundation. He was the end of season 1 guest. And then Gledis is part of a series of folks that we have who are in the mental health space who have gotten into it for a variety of reasons. And so I'm just so happy that you're here. So let's just get right into it. So Gledis, if you could share with us kind of what your gut punch was, and take us through kind of what it was and then how you got through it, that would be great.
Yeah. My gut punch moment started in January of 2021. If we remember, this was the second year of COVID. I felt very blessed and grateful of not having experienced COVID, and no one in my family was impacted, so felt great. And, we're able to spend it outside of the city. No major impacts, just, being able to spend quality time with family in a healthy manner, which I felt very grateful for.
Yeah. And I remember, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember feeling the same way. Like I was very fortunate with my family as well. Like luckily no one was greatly impacted by it. And you kind of, I don't know, it was kind of like an unsettling feeling. You're like, okay, I think we got through this. Yeah, I remember that moment in time.
Exactly. As I was reflecting, it was, January 21, and I was reflecting on 2020, what had taken place, and kind of reassessing my goals and, where I wanted to be in life and how I wanted to plan my next 5 to 10 years. And in the middle of January, I woke up to a 3 a.m. international phone call letting me know that a dear friend of mine whom I cared very deeply was acting very strange, completely out of baseline, very difficult to understand what, the person was going through. And then the situation precipitated for the worse, where they were hospitalized in a hospital. And unfortunately, this person was on their own, no family around. They did have access to some childhood friends. So a bunch of us gathered together to figure out, the situation. What can we do? What does this look like? And within the first 72 hours, we figured out that the person had a mental health breakdown. They were involuntarily admitted in a psychiatry ER room in one of the New York City hospitals. With that said, as a very close friend, I have a tendency, when people are in crisis, I run to the fires.
Oh, you mean you care for them?
Exactly. Well, if you want to put it that way, right? It's
Yes.
a natural default, I would say, that I run to the rescue. And with that said, of course, I had no clear understanding, no depth of what the current situation was at the time. I just said, I am going to swoop in and see what I can do here. And then, of course, look after this person while they're going through such a horrible experience being in New York City alone. Within a couple of days, we figured out diagnosis,
Okay.
what was happening. Also, something to keep in mind that, considering that it's still COVID, there were still a lot of restrictions. We weren't
Yes,
able
of
to get
course.
the right information, or we weren't able to visit. Lots of limitations, and especially when you're not immediate family. That's another regulatory complexity that made this journey a bit more difficult. But we figured out within a couple of days what was happening. Then thankfully the person was getting released in about, I would say, like 7 days after being hospitalized. So I was like, okay, we have the diagnosis. We now know what medication needs to be taken in order to stabilize the person. Great. And what really unfolded, this was just the beginning. This was just the surface of a mental health journey. Unfortunately, the person was misdiagnosed in the hospital. They were given not the right medication, and they were simply given some sleeping medication to just mitigate the situation very short term and not really a long term option. So then the responsibility fell on me as a caregiver who decided to stay with a person and look after them to figure out how do we move forward. And unfortunately, the situation precipitated for the worse, where the person was experiencing ongoing mania. I would say, one of the obvious symptoms during their first breakdown was mania.
Right.
And so they were at the hospital, they were just simply able to stabilize it, and then they release you back out into the
And
world.
Gladys, let me just interject here. For those people listening who've never really seen somebody in a manic state, could you just describe that to us?
Yeah. This was also new to me, right? I did not
Yeah.
understand what mania is, what it looks like, what the symptoms are. So, like it really varies. It varies on the personality of the person. What I've noticed, it inflates some of the highs of the actual character of someone, right? So usually if the baseline of someone is, very jolly, very happy, very high energy, is going to just simply inflate it
Okay.
to, let's say if usually they're at a 10, it's going to be at a 30,
Okay.
right? But the symptoms for this particular person, before they actually had their episode, the onset of mania takes about 3 to 4 weeks. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Okay.
And some of the symptoms are lack of sleep. You're
Yeah.
constantly pacing. I speak with this specific example,
Yeah, no,
right?
and that's just because I'm just curious because it's a term these days as mental health is becoming more and more of a challenge, a societal challenge.
Yeah.
I hear increasingly about bipolar diagnosis and, the whole manic state. And so I know it is very specific to this person. So if you could continue, but just I wanted our listeners to have an idea of kind of what it can be like
Yeah.
to witness
Yeah.
in person.
Yeah. Loss of appetite, drastic weight loss, right? And I would say constant pacing and extreme irritability, and definitely, severe depression, anxiety. And I think the most obvious things that I noticed in conversations with this person was what I call a thoughts integration. So different stories of different timelines of different people kind of emerging all together and being incorporated into this person's story.
So it's like taking like almost like disconnected thoughts or disconnected narratives and bringing them together into one what the person perceives as a connected narrative or a connected story, but you as the listener know that it's not that way. Is that about right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like me as a listener, I'm trying to decipher what is actually happening and what is
Gotcha.
the person saying. And then of course it comes along with paranoia, and I would say definitely with a dash of conspiracy theories, right? So it can be a combination of things. As I said, it really varies from person to person.
Yeah.
It varies from diagnosis, right? It's important to say that severe mental health symptoms can necessarily tie back to a certain diagnosis, right? Like everyone is extremely different, which is what makes mental health incredibly complex
Yes.
to comprehend and measure, and being able to look at it in a very objective manner. Going back, so a person had a manic episode. They were involuntarily hospitalized. They were in a hospital for about 7 days. They weren't given the correct diagnosis and they weren't given the correct medication. And they're released COVID positive. So then within a couple of days, then both of us, are cohabitating and we're both COVID positive. And then my next challenge was, well, I don't see this person being better. Yes, they were able to be a bit more stable. I would say like a softer version of mania. And then my biggest challenge was, okay, I need a psychiatrist. I
Yeah.
need to be able to find a very good psychiatrist and I need to find a therapist. While technically speaking, most hospitals, after you are hospital, they do release you with a package. But think of 2021, no one was physically available. Every
Very
doctor was
resource. Yeah. Very resource
like,
challenge. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. There's a shortage of providers. Even those providers that are available are incredibly overburdened, or everyone is remote. I went on a hunt for 48 hours. Very stressed about it because I wasn't able to find a psychiatrist. I called every university center, every hospital associated with the university, anyone that I could really come across. And every time I made an appointment online, the appointment would get canceled on me. And I would say, "Hey, why are you like?" It would get canceled on me like one hour prior to the session. And when I would ask, or hey, I would call, they're like, "Well, we don't take, the doctor, the
Yeah.
assistant would get on and say, hey, the doctor doesn't take anyone that was just recently discharged." So I was like, who in New York City, for the love of God, takes someone who has been discharged? Like, what is happening? So it felt a very desperate situation that I was going through. And then, of course, we had galvanized, an international network to be able to find a psychiatrist. And then a reference came through, an international referral out of all places, right?
Wow.
You would think, like, because within 48 hours, like I
Yeah.
needed a psychiatrist that could do a proper evaluation
Yep.
and prescribe medication, because as I was noticing, the condition was worsening. With that said, finally found the psychiatrist. Great. I called. I'm like, okay, here's the situation. They're like, okay, they need to be under medication immediately. And
And
then
let me
with
just
that,
interject. Did you know at this point that the person had been misdiagnosed and given the wrong meds?
no,
Okay.
no, no, absolutely. I had the paperwork that I knew what they had been diagnosed with, and I knew the
Yep.
medication that they had given, which was ineffective,
Okay.
right?
So you knew something was wrong, but you
Yeah.
didn't know what it
Yeah.
was.
I was like, "Oh, they're not, they're getting worse. The situation is not
Yeah.
improving." And mind you, first COVID that you get hit, you're also very, you start weakening yourself. So I was like, okay, I'm looking after someone that, we both were quarantining, right?
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
staying in. And found this psychiatrist. I'm like, okay, great. Call them up. I was like, do you take insurance? They're like, no, I don't take insurance. I was like, okay, so how much do you charge? And it's like, well, the first evaluation is $700. And then it's like, after it's 500. I was like, okay, you know what? You're the only guy in town that seems to want to, take this
Help.
in,
Yeah.
and it is what it is, right? Thinking back, it makes me wonder, like, if you don't have access to resources and if you don't have the financial means, paints like what really happens,
You
right?
do. Yeah.
It's scary to think about it. And we start the process. The person is prescribed more potent medication to be able to stabilize them. And it's a couple of days now. It's a struggle. So the other lesson here for me is the medication is not immediate. It usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks to see the results of medication. And unfortunately, this person was not improving within the 3 days that we did start treatment. And at this point, I had not slept. The person, as I said, the signs of mania for this particular case was constant pacing. They wanted to leave the apartment. I was like, we're towards the end of our, COVID quarantining. I was,
Quarantine. Yeah.
yeah. It's like we can't leave the apartment. And it's just the situation was getting for the worse. And I saw myself that I was not sleeping. Like I think the third day, maybe I had like 3 hours of sleep
Oh, gosh.
because I was greatly concerned that, something might happen. This person
Yeah.
might do something. It was being hyper vigilant.
Yes.
That was my priority in this situation. And with that said, thankfully, I had done some research, looked at really top rated psychiatry hospitals, and Cornell was very close to where we were. So with that said, I was like, okay, this situation is no longer bearable. It's not going to get improved because if I continue like this, like, okay, I might fall asleep and I lose control of the entire situation. And then I don't know what this person,
Well,
potentially will do.
you tried your best. I mean, you really did all you could do and then some and then some. Then you got to the point where you were like, okay, this needs to, this is bigger than I realized, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but at this point, we're like, it's a physical thing,
Yeah.
right?
Got it.
It's, hey, sit here, lay down and, sleep here. It was, I would say, the ultimate nurse,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yes.
And with that said, I was like, okay, I called the doctor. I said, I don't see any improvements. The person has been, taking the medication for the last 3 days. And I said, I'm going to take them at Cornell ER. Psychiatry.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, keep me posted. Let me know how it goes. So the person had lost a lot of weight and they weren't very conscious in terms of like what was really happening. And so I ordered an Uber. We went to Cornell, went to the ER, walked in. The doctors came in. They said, okay, good thing you brought them in because they're manic. They're fully manic. So at that point, I was like, okay, I felt a bit of relief. They're like,
Yep.
okay, it's, in a sense, they validated my decision to bring
Yes.
them in.
Yes.
The other challenge as you're going through this is like, does this person need to be hospitalized, right? Like, can we do our best to really treat them at home and look after them without having to subject them to another hospitalization?
Because I think that especially when it's your first exposure to something like this and I think anytime you experience anything for the first time, at least for myself, I never believe that it's as bad as it actually is, right? And I keep
Yeah.
making all of the excuses for why it is the way that it is. So, oh, well, this is going on or this is going on because for me, the way I think is I get comfort in positive thoughts, right? When I was going through my whole health thing, I'm like, oh, it's bronchitis. Oh, I went to urgent care. Oh, I have meds. Well, I'll be fine. Because I had never been through something like that before. It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I was literally dying. I mean, literally dying. And the only reason I went to the hospital was because my sister's a doctor. And I promised her that if I felt like crap, when I woke up the next morning, so the story goes that I would. So with you, like, I get it. Like you would never, this is your first rodeo with something like this.
Yeah.
This is your first time seeing anyone in a completely manic state. And yeah, I can imagine it was like validating, a relief. You're like, okay, I did the right thing by taking this person to the
Yeah.
hospital. That
Because I
must have
think
been huge for you. Yeah.
after seeing the first hospital and I seen the experience, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's actually horrible
Yeah.
to be hospitalized for mental health. Like I think it's I think also, like, I would like to make a difference what it really means to go to a hospital for something physical versus a mental health. It's a
Yes.
very different, I would say, unpleasant, dehumanizing experience. So that's why on my end, when it came, to, making the decision to bring this person back, in my head, I was like, well, this is the top place in New York City to bring them,
Yes.
because that first place was absolutely terrible. But it's not, as I said, it's a very uh, dehumanizing experience to be in a psychiatry ward, which makes mental health incredibly even more challenging when, as a caregiver, as a family member, you have to make that decision.
Let me just go in on something that you're saying. So I've never, in my when I was in the hospital, like I wasn't in the psych ward. I was, on various floors, but never in the psych ward.
Mm.
Um, and to your point, I have heard that it is very challenging, and when people talk to me about, taking their loved ones to psych wards or mental health institutions specifically, whatever, the question I always ask is, do they know why they're there? And there's two questions. Do they know why they're there? And did they voluntarily decide to go? Because those are two huge
Mm.
questions. I know I have a friend who has someone that recently had to go to a psych ward, and just that they were in a very manic state, and the question was posed to this person of, well, will you go with me, or do I need to call the police to escort
Mm.
you?
Mm. Mm.
And then the person voluntarily went, and then the person did not know why they were there.
Because you have to get, once you're in a manic state, you're no longer conscious.
Exactly right.
You
Exactly
know,
right. So it was,
and
and this person, to your point, felt very, very guilty about having to bring their friend, even though the friend said they would go, felt very
yeah,
guilty about having to bring their friend to the psych ward because they knew that it's not like the maternity floor where everything is maraschino cherries and sundaes for the most part. Obviously not everything, but for the most part, it's strict. It's a different environment.
yeah.
Um,
You
you're
sometimes, while I was in the ER waiting, you will see people come in handcuffs who potentially committed a crime, and right, and they're not in the right state of mind. So you're brought into a department of a hospital that you're brought together with all types of people, right? So something
We're all
also,
there for various reasons, who were all some are there knowingly, and some were forced there, and I think that, as you're saying, that's part of what makes mental illness so complicated, is some people realize they're going through something and other people do not,
yeah,
and when you're in that manic state, as you said, it can be hard for them to differentiate reality versus not.
exactly.
Anyway,
Exactly.
continue. I'm sorry, I just
Exactly.
want to clarify that.
No, 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 absolutely. And then for me, so it was validating that the doctor said, okay, it's a good
Yes.
thing you brought them in. I gave them history, some background in terms of what has been happening in the last 3 weeks, the first scenario. The other challenging aspect of voluntarily or involuntarily committing someone to a hospital is there is a 72-hour period where the person can be released, right? Like, so if they are, coherent enough and logical enough, even though they're ill, they can manipulate the situation and actually able to get out of being hospitalized for potentially 7 to 15 days,
Yes.
right? So it's, for me, it was important to say, this is what's happening. This is what this is what happened in the first hospital. They weren't treated properly. It was the wrong medication. We did start the right medication, but it's taking a while to kick in. So this person needs to be stable and normalized, and they need to be in a hospital this time around, not for 1 week, but they need to be in it for at least 2 to 3 weeks, for us to like finally figure out, the right diagnosis and the right type of treatment. So as a loved one, as a caregiver, as someone who's supporting, anyone going through a mental health challenge, you have to be the advocate for that person, right? Because that person is not in their right state of mind. They do not understand what is best for them. So it's not just the physical aspect of looking after someone, really going at it with the doctors.
Well, and
Unfortunately, and at the time, hospitals don't treat you. Hospitals operate, I say this, hospitals operate like a catch and release program. They grab you, they stabilize you, they release you back out. They're not incentivized to keep you for a month, 2 months, 3 months. Their job is, hey, are you suicidal or are you at harm of yourself and others around you? Great, we're going to take you in. Like, the situation has to be so dire for someone to be committed. Otherwise, they will not take you in.
I just want to go back to what you said about the importance of having an advocate. Again, from my own experience, the importance of having someone who will say something on your behalf is so incredibly important, because half the time, the doctors, if you're a patient, you try to advocate for yourself, they don't listen to you. Or they think that because you're so drugged up on the medicine that they gave you that you don't get it. So you don't necessarily understand what you're saying. When I was going through my whole thing, I had a situation vividly remember where the doctors were standing, I was laying in bed and the doctors were standing there talking next to me about me. And I was fully cognizant, at least from my perspective, I was fully cognizant. And I heard what they were saying. And I said, hello. I literally said this, hello. I'm like, you guys understand that I know everything that you're saying about me. I hear it. I understand it. And I disagree with it. And there were 3 of them, and they all just paused and looked at me. They're like, we didn't realize that. And I said, yeah, I obviously I could tell. And I'm not going to say that changed the tenor of my staycation in the hospital, shall we say. But it was very liberating in some ways, but it was also really humiliating, because I know that, you're in a situation like that, you're fighting for your life in whatever capacity it is, whether it's a health thing, a mental health thing, or some combination of the two. And you like to think that you have a voice and you like to think that you're heard. But to your point, a lot of time you're ignored. And so having someone that you can even say, hey, they did this, can you tell them not to? Or, hey, they gave me this med and I don't know why. It's so incredibly important. And the one question that is so simple to ask that no one asks in the hospital is to simply say, why? Why this medication? Why this treatment? Why are you doing this? Because for some reason, society, most people, not everybody, most people believe that if someone is a doctor, that they know everything and they know what they're doing. And I know from my own journey, that is not the case. And so I just wanted to get on my soapbox on that one for a minute, because had I not advocated for myself, my outcomes and my quality of life would be very, very different than they are now. So just throw that out there. So continue
Because,
on.
something to think about. Hospitals are incredibly overburdened. They
That's
need to
right. That's right.
operate under a certain standard procedure and protocol,
Yep.
right?
Lack of
They're not
nurses, lack of beds, lack of insurance payments, lack of everything. Yes.
right. So it has to be what is the most critical, and can we get the situation under control? And
Yeah.
especially in mental health cases where you have people that are completely out of their baseline, they're not controllable. They might be angry, they might be attacking other people, they might be trying to harm themselves, right? Or they might be having a tantrum, screaming. Think of the worst that potentially happens in a psychiatry ward.
Right. That's right.
And so in that case, it becomes very critical for someone to have an advocate.
That's right.
So for me, it was very critical to explain the situation, give history into the person's personality and their behaviors, what is really normal, what is abnormal, and what were the changes that were observed during three-week journey so far in. So with that said, the journey at Cornell was great. Uh, they were able to stay in a hospital for an additional 2 weeks. The psychiatrist, the nurse practitioner, the social worker, the care coordination was incredibly supportive and effective, where I was the feedback and the input that I was giving was very much integrated into the decision making, how to proceed forward with this person. And with that said, I felt, after seeing what happened the first time, and this person coming back in an empty apartment, I was like, this, after the second hospitalization, this person needs more time in maybe not necessarily such a clinical place, but I would say more of a soft landing where they can really process what has happened in their life and integrate this experience as they're trying to come back to their day-to-day life, right? And I felt that it was very critical for this person to actually go to a rehabilitation center. Because, as I said, hospitals, you're dealing with the most severe cases. The
Right.
goal of a hospitalization is to actually normalize you, get you back to some type of baseline where you are conscious, you're self-sufficient. And I felt that based on what had happened within the span of 5 weeks, this person needed time off from work, needed to be in a supportive place where they can go through the right type of therapy and treatment to, as I said, to recognize what has happened, right? Because once the other challenging aspect of a mental health journey, once you're diagnosed with something, it's not the end, right? Is just the beginning of understanding what was wrong and how you can live a great, fulfilling life. But I think that breaking point that comes with any type of diagnosis, not just mental health, if it's cancer or if it's just like what you went through, Kathryn, right? It's incredibly hard to process.
Yes. Yes.
And you need time for that.
Yeah.
So I felt that for this person, it was very critical to actually go to a rehab center, spend, at least 3 to 4 weeks. And then, well, ideally, I wanted them to take at least 6 months off from work. But then, like the challenging aspect of work, it's the insurance will only approve a certain number of days for you to have off, right? And then you're expected to come back. And so after the hospitalization from the hospital, they were able to go to a treatment center, spend about, I think, 3 to 4 weeks there, where some good work was done. I would say like it was a soft landing before they can come back. Now, at the same time that, of course, I'm coordinating this entire long-term plan and dealing with the insurance and dealing with the work, coordinating with the work of this person and submitting and filing all the paperwork for the time off I would say within the first 24 hours that I was able to hospitalize this person at Cornell, I started having my own issues and I thought these issues were COVID related. So this was towards the tail end of COVID for me. And I was by myself. And I started having these palpitations where I couldn't breathe. I never experienced this in my life before. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is happening? I can't breathe. I opened the window and all of a sudden all these crazy thoughts go into my head. Oh, I can't breathe. It's COVID related. If I end up in the hospital, I'm going to get intubated. There were horror stories throughout 2020 that we all heard and saw in the news media. But I think the fear of at that particular moment being on my own and not being able to get the situation under control where, oh my goodness, I have to call 911 because I don't think I'm going to be able to make it out of the situation that I was in. So I did call 911. It took them about, 15 minutes to come. And by the time I made it to the hospital, they did all the checks, they did the EKG. And I said, well, what is it?
Right.
Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. I was like, well, what do you mean there's nothing wrong with me? Like, 30 minutes ago, I couldn't breathe for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And is this COVID related? Oh, we don't know, but we'll give you a department to go to and follow up, right? If it's COVID related. So
And
of
then they'll
course,
give you 8 weeks. Yeah, exactly.
right. So in addition to, looking after the care coordination for this person. In addition to that, I started my own health journey where I started going to my general doctor, going to a cardiovascular doctor, and said, hey, here's what happened. Is this COVID related? So, like, let's go through the stress test. Let's do all of your tests and figure out what happened. Maybe if it was COVID related, I forget. I think at Bellevue Hospital, they did have like a
Yep.
long COVID department where you can become part of the research.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I did the stress test. I got my, blood work back. Okay, everything normal. I'm like, okay, I kind of attributed to like a short, something COVID related. And then I kind of moved on because, of course, I was dealing with a much bigger situation in my hands. So the person is back from the treatment center. They're coherent. They're doing better. They understand what took place. They're taking the medication. So I was like, great. Like, this is a good place to be.
Yep.
But of course, it's on the surface, right? And it takes a long time and with a lot of discipline, I call it with a lot of mental health discipline, where you have to be fully clean, not just alcohol, but sleep habits,
Yep.
diet habits, behavioral habits, right? And the other challenge here now that we're coming back to a very stressed work environment after going through, I would say, a life-changing event, it's not possible to come back to a thriving corporate career with a lot of demands and a lot of pressures, right? So that added to the challenge, which is why I had wished that, when someone goes through these type of experience, please take the time off. Please take the 6 months off, take the 12 months off. It's absolutely worth it. It is within the benefits. It is available. It's just a matter of like making it work. But this person was adamant about going back to work, right? And which was a mistake.
Yeah.
So the work environment, unfortunately, did not help the journey here. While they were doing, slightly better, they were managing, the psychiatrist that we were working with said, oh, maybe you don't have this. Potentially you have something else, so I'm going to give you some other medication. So this only complicated the journey, because then when I would have conversations about compliance, medication compliance, the other, I would say, dimension of mental health is that the medications are very controversial.
Yes.
They come with great side effects and
Yes.
long-term impact.
Yes.
While they can be very potent and have high efficacy in being able to stabilize you, but long-term, we don't know what the implications could be, right? And they have day-to-day implications where they do impact physical health, kidneys, hand tremors, hair loss,
Right.
right? It's complicated, right? So it's like, and I fully understand that, but when you're in such a dire mania situation, you need to do what is required of you to get to that point, and then we can reassess again what the treatment plan should be. So I call this kind of like the gray phase where, okay, they're slightly better, they're conscious, they're fully aware of what has happened, but they can't seem to want to change their behavior towards certain things about their life, which is inhibiting the treatment plan. But things were getting better in, I would say in 2 months. And here's where I was looking to step back from my caregiving role. And I felt more confident that this person was on the right path. Great. And then here comes the other challenge where I left. I went to Italy to see my family, and then I get another phone call that the person is manic again. I was like, my goodness, what has happened now? I left them a couple of days ago. They were in good shape. They were doing better. They themselves were supposed to fly and see their own family, right? And they stopped taking the medication. They were non-med compliant. And I think, what tends to happen is like, after 3 months, I'm doing better. Like that was nothing. Like I don't need, I'm back to full control, full sovereign control.
Yep. Yep.
And, that was just a blip, right? Not realizing that this is a long-term condition that it needs to be treated either with meds or normeds or through behavioral changes, right?
Yes.
If you can manage without meds.
Yes.
And they were manic again. So then I had to stage an intervention from Italy.
Wow.
And I did send people to, to have this person, move out of there, be surrounded by some people, start taking the medication again, but they refused. So then, it took me 48 hours where I called 911.
Right.
And they were like, okay, health check. We spoke to them. They're fine. I was like, no, they're not fine. I constantly had to call 911 for this person to be picked up because I knew what was coming down the pipeline,
Yeah.
right?
Unfortunately, it did. Yes.
Unfortunately, so within the third time that the health check was done, the same people said, okay, we had to pick them up because we noticed changes. I was like, okay, yes. Because here's another aspect of being an advocate and talking about the history of the person and what it looks like. So here's again that gray area in mental health that makes it complicated. Hey, is a person a harm to themselves and others around them? What does that look like? So they were picked up again. They were sent to a separate hospital. They were kept there for, I would say, like for 2 weeks. And I came back, and as I went to visit them, they were refusing medication in the hospital. And I said, look, you do have rights when you go to a hospital. You can't necessarily be forced, but there is a legal process that you have to go through. So if you refuse, you have the right to refuse, and then an assessment will be made and a decision will be made by the court. And my advice to them was, look, the longer you fight this, the longer you're going to be here. So I think, just start taking the meds, stabilize, and, we can get you out of here and then, get back on track to that treatment plan where you were doing so much better, like 2 months ago. So we did, we, left the hospital, and then for a good 5 days, there was still non-med compliance, certain behaviors that were unacceptable.
So it's getting, unfortunately, it's getting worse.
It's
Just,
getting worse.
yeah.
It's getting worse, right? The person absolutely refuses at all costs to take medication, and it's
And just, do you remember, like, was it that they didn't like the way the meds made them feel? Like, what was their reason for not wanting to
I'm
take?
not ill. There's nothing wrong
No.
with me.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely nothing wrong with me, which is a double-edged sword with mental health cases, right?
Yeah.
It's acknowledgement that, hey, this is something, this is a diagnosis. It can
Yep.
be managed. People can live incredibly fulfilling, healthy lives. Like there's nothing wrong with it, right?
That's right.
It's just a matter of how you manage it. And of course, I knew it was the side effects of the medication why this person would refuse.
Right.
But there was just a lack of personal
Yep.
accountability
Yep.
uh, of what they're doing to themselves and what they're doing to people around them,
Around
right?
them. Exactly.
So within 5 days, there was again, as I said, certain unacceptable behaviors and lack of med compliance. So I called 911 again and I had them picked up. At this point, this was tough because so far,
Now we're going to be going into our fourth hospital at this point, right?
yeah, within
Wow.
9 months.
Wow.
Right. So this situation was tough because the first hospitalization was through childhood friends.
Okay.
Second hospitalization was I took them. And third hospitalization, I staged an
From
intervention
Italy.
from
Yeah.
Italy, right? And then this one, well, I called 911, like cops show up.
Oh gosh.
in these situations, which I was not aware of.
Yeah. So we've gone
And
from like the gentlest way with the friends to different stages of severity. And now we have the police involved.
yeah, now we have, well, it's a must. They show up
Yes. Yes,
because
that's right. Yep.
if it's a mental health scenario, the police have to show up. All right. And then there's like an interview process, what's happening, what's going on. So then, of course, I go back to explaining the situation. And then, okay, they decide to pick the person up. They get sent to a separate hospital. And then at this point, Kathryn, like it's 1 a.m. in the morning. And I get a follow-up phone call from one of the officers to check in on me. I was exhausted.
I can imagine.
This was kind of like my weeping moment because for
Did
9,
you feel defeated? Did you feel
I
defeated?
did.
Yeah.
I did. I
Yeah.
did. I felt desperate. I was exhausted because throughout these 9 months, I'd been fighting so hard on a daily basis to keep things going. Like, I don't think at any moment I said, "Hey, what's happening with me?" I was just, I'm very goal oriented. So to me, it's like, okay, I need to get this person well.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the priority here. And regardless of what I went through or we went through, I was very committed to this goal without realizing that what this has been doing to me, right? The other challenging aspect of mental health, unlike a physical illness where people really rally around you, people will rally around you at the first crisis, right? But then most people walk away. Unfortunately, no one wants to deal with, this type of situation. And even, family members walk away,
That's
right?
right.
So it takes a lot of will and grit to stick around someone who is not doing well, and also to have the empathy and the compassion to be able to separate the disease from the person, to
Yes.
say
Well,
this is the disease that's talking. This behavior is a result
yeah.
of this illness. Like,
Yeah.
this is not the person that I know. And the heartbreaking aspect of this journey for me was seeing someone so smart, so energetic, so social, so intelligent, completely disintegrate through this process. And to me, that was such a heartbreaking process
Oh, I'm sure.
because it's very illogical. Like, it's such an invisible disease. Like,
Yes.
I understand if you're cut and you're bleeding, right? Oh, neurological, you know.
Well, no, but it's also it's as you said, when we first started chatting, it was every mental health case is different. Nothing
Yeah.
is textbook. With most medicine, we have protocols for cancer treatment. We have protocols for heart disease. We have
Yeah.
protocols for leukemia. There really aren't protocols for mental health because
No.
every person that is encounters it, that is challenged by it, whether they have it themselves or whether their support group is challenged
Mm,
by it,
mm.
there is no formula. And I think
Yeah.
that is and I think, the frustration, the frustration you're describing, I've heard from, so many people. It's like everyone cares, everyone loves the person, but everyone's level of patience also varies. And some
Mm-hmm.
people are like, what, they don't understand how someone can be non-med compliant. Like they're like, you have a protocol. Why
Yeah.
aren't you following it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as you said before, what's also challenging is the person who's going through it, the person who is bipolar or has whatever, they don't necessarily think that they're sick because their arm
Exactly.
isn't broken. And we in society, the way that we've been conditioned to believe that someone is sick is by physical appearance.
Yeah.
Broken arm, broken leg,
Yeah.
heart
Yeah,
disease,
exactly.
whatever.
Physical.
Yes,
Physical.
that's
It's
right.
like,
That's right. That's right.
this is a physical thing. There's nothing wrong with me. Absolutely
You
not.
look, you look, the great thing. You look great. You look fine. Right?
Yeah.
And that's actually the
Yeah.
worst thing anybody can say to someone because
Yeah.
there's probably something and everybody has something, right? It's just how much do we share about it? So
Yeah.
this is such an important part of this conversation. Such
But
an important.
it's It's a loop. The
It
mental
is.
health journey is a complete loop, and I call it like it's a vicious cycle of multiple hospitalizations. And, after this experience, I've spoken to other people. I've spoken to people people like their mothers are struggling with early Alzheimer's, and there's mental health in there. And right, like
As
it's
we live longer, there are more and more mental health challenges that are coming.
absolutely, absolutely. So for me, this fourth hospitalization and all of a sudden, like, I think just, experiencing cops, visiting and interacting with them, it felt like it was a violent experience.
Yeah, I understand
It
that.
wasn't physically violent, right? But like just the entire experience felt, very, very violating. And as I said, this was like 1 a.m. by the time the person, got picked up. And by 2 a.m., I'm just in my living room and weeping. Like, how
No.
did I get into this situation? How on earth did I end up here? Why am I here? Why
Yeah.
am I going through what I'm going? So to me, when I think of like the gut punch moment, like to me, that was that gut punch. It's like,
Yeah.
God, why have you sent me this experience, these circumstances? What am I doing here? And so it took a moment to release all the emotions that I was going through. And the following day I get on a call with the team, the doctor's team at this
Yeah.
fourth hospital. And I speak with a social worker and I give her background and context and the story for the
Yeah.
last 9 months. And I said, I don't know what to do anymore. I said,
Yeah.
I am out of options. It's, this is what's happening. And I said, because the other thing I was wondering, like, how many days? And they're like, oh, it's probably going to be like less than like 5 days that they're going to be in. Like, it's not going to be effective because I'm like, I need them to be on medication. I need them to be med compliant. Like what can we do? Right. And then she said, look, Gledis, at some point in our lives, we need to walk away. You've done everything possible.
Oh, right.
And I said, I'm afraid to walk away because if I walk away, they might do something and then it's gonna be on me.
Yes.
Right. And she said, you just need to walk away. And that was quite a moment
Yeah.
because for these 9 months, I've been at it, doing everything possible to save
Trying
this.
so hard. Trying so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking to more than 100 providers. Hey, what is, what does this patient journey look like? When are they going to get better? Can you give me some type of measure for me to figure out if they're improving or not? Like, I don't want to find myself in a situation where I have to call 911. I want to be able to have the tools and resources
Yep.
available to be proactive about this, right? Like what does that look like? It was a complete nightmare. Like the care coordination, incredibly fragmented, frustrating, challenging, could never get
Yeah.
a straight answer. And it was kind of like hitting the wall every time.
I
It's
can
like,
only
oh,
imagine. Yeah.
okay, like I spoke to so and so and like let's call, let's call this other place and let's call a coach or like thinking of all options available, right? Like what does that look like?
That's right.
And as I said, like I think being in it for so long and is such a intensive environment, the rest of the people walk away, right? Like people come through the first time, second time, but people
Right.
don't
That's
stick
right.
around long term, which for me felt it was a very lonely journey. I had two very good friends who were incredibly supportive and felt like they were my rock. But at the same time, like this is not something I could share with anyone. No
Right.
one could understand. I mean, I couldn't understand it myself, the complexity of the situation that I have gotten myself into. So for me, in addition to having this 2 a.m. weeping moment, and the next day speaking to the social worker where she's telling me at some point you need to walk away because you've become an enabler. You're not, it's
Ugh.
like I spoke to them and, they think that you're just going to stick around no matter what. And so to me, that was the permission in a way that I needed to, okay, I need to walk away from the
Yeah.
situation
And I can
because
only imagine how hard that was for you to do.
yeah, yeah. But I think it was like turning that compassion faucet off,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Well, because I would imagine that you didn't view yourself as an enabler. You viewed yourself as someone who was trying to help. So
I
the fact
viewed
that you're
myself as
getting
the
that label.
fixer, the
Yes.
solution person, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm trying to fix this and it's fixable and it's doable, which is how I've always operated, I think, throughout my life. But for the
Yeah.
first time, I felt that this journey completely cracked me open.
I'm sure.
And it cracked me open in the sense that I couldn't rationalize it, intellectualize it,
Yep.
as I've always done with things that have happened. I couldn't control it. It made me vulnerable, which I hate being vulnerable.
Yep, yeah. No, and I think too, I mean, from someone who's a reformed, I mean, I'm like you. Like I've always, I mean, up until my whole thing, I always believed I could control. I always
Yeah,
believed that if I worked my hardest, that it would be fine.
there's a solution to everything,
Right,
right?
right, right. And what I learned from my whole thing is there's only so much that we can control, and there's and there gets to a point with everything where once you have exhausted every possible resource, once your mind has spun in every possible direction, once you have had the sleepless nights, there are certain times where you have to just walk away.
Yeah.
And it is so hard to do. And I think,
Mhm.
anyone who's listening to this part of the conversation and you've been in this situation, it is so hard and you are going to feel horrible about doing it. But it gets to the point where they're truly the statement, there is nothing else I can do, that
Yeah.
you have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. It
And
was
it is so hard.
yeah, it was this sense of like radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Right. As I said, I've always been very goal driven. This
Yeah.
is achievable. This is doable. Right. It's very fixer solution
Yeah.
oriented. And all of a sudden, I've been at it for 9 months, and I'm like, uh, I'm exhausted. I'm falling apart, and for the first time in my life, I feel where things are out of my control. My life is falling apart.
Horrible. Yeah.
Right? Like,
Horrible.
I didn't know what to make of it. And so speaking to the social worker, she said, "You gotta walk away." And
Yeah.
which is what I did.
Yeah.
I walked away, and surprisingly, this person did get better after I walked away. Think I think what they went through, and they had some realizations that what they were doing was harmful to themselves and the people around them that were really trying so hard to look after them. Thankfully, they did get better. During the third hospitalization, we're able to find through the care coordination team a great psychiatrist, a great therapist. So it wasn't all this effort did result ultimately to this person getting better, but it was just a very severe
Oh, yeah.
process and journey to get there. And then after walking away, I had some family stuff. Well, I had to go see my father who had surgery in Europe. My uncle passed away. This is all within the same month. And then I come back to work, and here's where my entire physical body is collapsing because every 2 weeks I am now in the ER room with heart palpitations, weak knees
Oh,
and
gosh.
muscles. And like now my body is crumbling, Kathryn.
Because it's just all that you've gone through. Yes.
And of course, at the time, like it's physical. I'm in the ER. I'm like, let's go through all the tests. Let's go, let's go to every specialist, which I did, right? I kept going to the cardiovascular doctor, to the neurologist. I thought maybe I have early signs of MS, right? Like there's all types of things that you
You can go
start
through all the scenarios.
ruminating. And so I had every test done possible. And I saw at least 20 specialists and for all results to come back negative. And then for my general doctor to say, maybe you have chronic anxiety.
God.
So after 12 months, I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. most likely. But this is just to show you the effects of mental health,
Yes, that's right.
not just for the ones that are going through it, but for the ones that are supporting someone in their family or in their circle. So I call this the reckoning year for me,
Yeah.
because I mean, I was never the same.
You can't be after going through something like that. You can't.
Yeah, I was never the same, and as I said, it really cracked me open and it made me vulnerable, which is what I needed when I look back and reflect on it, because I was on this path. I had my plans and I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I'm going to do it and how I'm going to get there.
Yep.
And this was just a curveball, a very big curveball
Life is
thrown,
not linear.
yes, thrown my way.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I am reassessing and evaluating everything about my own path and my own journey. And, how do I want to spend my next 10, 15, 20 years of my life? Right.
Yep.
And so, with that said, this caregiving journey happened all throughout 2021. And the last 3 months of 2021, I was going through my own health scare. And then by summer of 22, I decided to go into mental health and really take a crack at it based on what I personally experienced, having the front view seat of
Yeah.
the entire system and the incredible challenges at it. And then, of course, I think having a personality of wanting to rationalize and comprehend and understand and break things down and fix things, I said that there's got to be a better way of, looking at mental health. And so, yeah, the inspiration for Kura Health comes out of this entire experience.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that question. I had a feeling that was, and that what a wonderful thing to be able to do as a result of navigating something that was challenging, to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, so how are you doing today in looking back on all of this?
Great. I'm doing amazing. I feel incredibly grateful to be on such a beautiful journey.
Yep.
And I feel that personally I am in full alignment in, living in purpose and mission. I think that breaking point was very much needed,
Yeah.
where and prior to that experience happening, I was experiencing some early signs of, I'd say, like emptiness and, hey, am I on the right path? And
Right.
I felt that I reached a certain intellectual plateau on the path
Yep.
that I was on. So I was looking for change. I just never in a million years
Thought it would
thought
be this.
this is the change that would come my way. So looking back at that moment of 2 a.m. and, crying in the living room, it was all worth it. It was all for a good reason, because I would be put on this wonderful path where, I get to launch a mission-driven company where
Yep.
today we track patient journey in mental health and substance abuse rehabilitation centers in order to create the ultimate scientific mental health stethoscope, where today we can track, predict, detect, and prevent major episodes. So no one is left with the only option to call 911. So we are in the predictive analytics of severe mental health illness.
So Gladys, usually the question, I'm gonna have these conversations with people. I usually ask, if someone's feeling stuck, what advice would you give them? But I'm gonna change it for you. What my question to you is, if someone's listening who's trying to be that advocate for someone that's struggling with mental health, what advice would you give them?
I think you have to keep going. You have to keep at it, as painful as it is, because, as I said, 4 hospitalization, 1 treatment center, we did get to great results.
Yes, you did.
Right? This person is living a very healthy life today. They practice mental health hygiene. They're not on medication,
That's
right?
great.
They had an entire 360 of their personal life, right? They've made the necessary changes to live I would say, like a very happy, fulfilling life. So even though at the time that I was going at it, it did not feel effective, but it was. It just, it became effective when I walked away.
And I think it's a great thought to end on. And it's such an ironic thought to end it. But also, I mean, I think to that point, it became effective when you walked away, but you stuck with that person through the thick and through the hard times. And you were at the point, you just didn't know it, where it was okay to walk away. And
Exactly.
it was that conversation with that social worker that truly was transformative
Absolutely.
and empowering. And, but I mean, do you have any regrets at all for the path that for how you navigated this?
No,
And that's
I
wonderful.
think
You
I
saved a
think I
life.
would do yeah, absolutely. I think I would do the same thing. I think I wish I was more well informed of
Yeah.
the space, the resources, the teams available. As I have embarked on a mental health journey, there are wonderful mental health advocates, wonderful companies that are doing incredibly mission driven, impact value driven things. And, that's my only, I would say, feedback. But hey, that's why I am in it.
Right. That's right. Well, I just want to, first of all, thank you for being on the show today. And if anyone would like to get in touch with you, Gladys, what's the best way?
Absolutely. So I am available on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and also in our website, www.𝗘𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗲. You can also feel free to email me, Gledis@𝗘𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗲. But I am very easily reachable.
Kura is spelled Kura.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so Kura Health. Okay, well, thank you for sharing your story. And I am so glad that you are okay and your friend is okay. And I think there are so many amazing lessons learned from this one. I'm just excited to have had you on the show. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share my story in a very vulnerable way, Kathryn. This is the first time that I share so much and in such intimate way. So thank you for letting me express that.
I appreciate that. Well, and thank you again. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Gut Punch. You'll hear more from us next week. Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of Gut Punch. I hope you found inspiration, because no matter how hard life hits, there's always a way forward. Make sure to follow or subscribe to Gut Punch on your favorite podcast platform. If you know someone who could use a little inspiration, share this episode with them. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay strong. See you in the next episode.